In the dead of night, at Stanford, a dream sparks a revolution. One idea, two minds, a world about to change forever. From dorm room scribbles to global domination, this is how Google was born.
A dimly lit Stanford University dorm room, 2 a.m., 1996. Larry Page, a 23-year-old grad student, bolts upright from a restless sleep heart pounding. He's just had a dream, a wild idea about downloading the entire World Wide Web onto his computer. It sounds absurd, impossible even yet. Larry can't shake the vision. He scribbles notes furiously. What if we could rank web pages by their links? He imagines the web as a sprawling network of pages voting for each other via hyperlinks, an academic citation system for the internet. Across campus, Sergey Brin, an outgoing 22-year-old computer science PhD student, will soon hear a knock on his door. Sergey opens it to find Larry, eyes alight with excitement. "Sergey, I think I figured something out." Larry blurts, shattering the quiet of the night. "What if we could download the whole web and analyze the links that could give us the importance of each page?" Sergey, initially perplexed, rubs his eyes. He and Larry aren't even close friends yet. In fact, they'd met only months before and argued about nearly everything. But something in Larry's voice grabs him. Sergey's skepticism melts into curiosity as he invites Larry in. The two spend the rest of the night hunched over a whiteboard, sketching out an idea that would one day reshape the world's information. In this cinematic moment of inspiration, Google's spark is lit. A spark born of academia idealism and a bold vision to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Little do they know these sleep-deprived brainstorming sessions are the genesis of a project that will grow from a college dorm room curiosity into one of the most influential companies on the planet. This is the story of Larry Page and Sergey Brin, two brash young innovators who turned a research project into Google, a company synonymous with knowledge and open access. It's a journey of collaboration, forged from initial clashes of unconventional thinking in a Silicon Valley garage of an engineering culture that redefined how tech startups operate, and of a mission-driven approach that challenged business norms at every turn. 50 minutes from now, you'll understand how a chance meeting at Stanford and a radical idea led to the birth of Google's brainchild, and how that brainchild went on to change the course of modern history. An unlikely meeting at Stanford. Our story begins in 1995 at Stanford University. Larry Page, a University of Michigan graduate considering Stanford for his PhD, arrives on campus for a tour. By chance, or perhaps fate, the task of showing him around falls to Sergey Brin. Sergey is known as an extrovert, brilliant, but blunt with a mischievous streak. Legend has it that during this tour, the two young men clashed almost immediately. They debated everything from the curriculum to the best buildings on campus. Larry found Sergey's approach abrasive. Sergey thought Larry was overly opinionated. Yet in those fiery debates, each recognized a formidable intellect in the other. A few months later, Larry enrolls at Stanford and finds Sergey again in the computer science department. Despite, or perhaps because of, their argumentative first encounter, they can't seem to stop talking or arguing. They spar over search engines, over data mining, over the future of the web. In one exchange, Larry insists the existing search engines are broken. They only count keyword matches and can be easily spammed. Sergey counters with a grin. "So you think you can make it better?" "Huh." Larry fires back. "Maybe I can, or maybe we can if you're up for it." It was in those lively disputes that a partnership was born. The two discovered they shared a grand ambition beneath their differences. Both wanted to make sense of the exploding information on the internet, and neither was afraid to challenge the status quo to do it. Larry Page left and Sergey Brin right in their Stanford days. The two met as grad students and initially disagreed on almost everything, a combative friendship that would form the core of Google's founding team. Their contrasting personalities actually complemented each other, sparking creative debates that fueled their collaboration. Despite their differences, Larry soft-spoken and intensely focused, Sergey outgoing and experimental. They formed a powerful team. As Sergey would later reflect, "We believed we could build a better search. We had a simple idea that not all pages are created equal. Some are more important." And as Larry often said, they carried a healthy disregard for the impossible, a mindset he picked up in college. If something seemed undoable, that was all the more reason to try. Over late-night pizzas and whiteboard sessions, the pair decided to collaborate on Larry's fledgling research project, a web crawler and page ranking algorithm. They didn't know it yet, but this decision, two PhD students teaming up on a research problem, was the first step toward creating Google. Before we dive into that breakthrough, it's worth noting the personal roots each brought to the table. Larry Page grew up in Michigan, the son of computer science academics. His childhood home was filled with computers and gadgetry, instilling in him a love for invention. As a kid, he read about Nikola Tesla and dreamed of changing the world through technology. Sergey Brin, born in the Soviet Union, emigrated to the US with his family at age 6 to escape persecution. His father, a mathematician, and his mother, a scientist, taught him to value knowledge and academic freedom. The memory of a society that restricted information left a deep mark on Sergey. He cherished the openness of the web and the free flow of information, so when Larry came proposing a better way to search the web, Sergey was intrigued, not just by the technical challenge, but by what it could mean for open knowledge. In hindsight, it seems almost inevitable that these two, one raised among computers and big ideas, the other driven by the ideal of knowledge for all, would hatch something as revolutionary as Google. BackRub, research roots of a better search engine. In 1996, Larry and Sergey officially kick off their joint research project. They call it BackRub, an odd name that raises a few eyebrows around the lab. Why BackRub? Because their search engine analyzes the web's backlinks, the incoming links to a web page, to judge its importance. This is a radical departure from the standard search engines of the time, which ranked results simply by counting how often a keyword appeared on a page. Larry and Sergey's insight is that a page cited linked by many others is likely more valuable, much like an academic paper referenced by numerous peers. Democracy on the web works, they would later say, meaning the collective linking behavior of millions of web creators could be harnessed to rank information. They dubbed their ranking algorithm PageRank, a playful nod to Larry's last name, as well as the concept of ranking pages. Working from their Stanford dorm rooms, Larry and Sergey hack together the first version of BackRub. It's scrappy and academic, held together with borrowed computers and inexpensive PC parts strewn across Larry's room. In fact, the very first Google server is built in a custom case made of Lego bricks, a colorful and quirky solution to house their hard drives. The setup looks more like a college science fair project than the foundation of a future tech giant cable snake around bunk beds and textbooks. The system is primitive but functional. BackRub begins crawling the web, storing pages and computing link scores. By early 1997, BackRub's results are surprisingly good, astonishingly good actually. When Larry and Sergey test queries on their system against leading search engines like AltaVista or Lycos, their results are more relevant and useful almost every time. Word spreads around the Stanford campus that those two grad students have built something special. Professors and students begin using BackRub for their own web searches, finding it uncannily adept at ferreting out the best information. The buzz soon extends beyond Stanford. the research paper Larry and Sergey write about their new search engine titled The Anatomy of a Large-Scale Hypertextual Web Search Engine becomes one of the most downloaded academic papers in internet history. In it, they describe a prototype search engine that indexes 24 million pages and demonstrates the efficacy of PageRank. The academic community takes note. This could be the next big leap in information retrieval. Yet, amid this initial success, Larry and Sergey remain very much researchers at heart. Their priority is knowledge, not money. In their paper, they even warned that search engines funded by advertising could have inherent bias and mixed incentives. A touch of irony given Google's eventual business model. For now, their focus is purely on improving BackRub. They refine the algorithms, push the limits of Stanford servers, and BackRub continues to grow. By 1997, it becomes clear that the cheeky name BackRub won't work long-term. They need something new, a name that can capture the vastness of their ambition to index everything. During a brainstorming session with friends, someone suggests Googleplex, the term for 10 to the 100. Larry shortens it to Google, symbolizing a number so massive it's virtually infinite. It perfectly reflects their mission to manage overwhelming quantities of data. When a friend tries to check domain availability, he accidentally types Google.com instead of Google. Larry finds he actually likes the quirky spelling. It's simple, playful, and oddly memorable. And just like that, on September 15, 1997, they register Google.com, a nerdy bit of wordplay, a mathematical misspelling. Yet it beautifully captures their vision to organize the seemingly infinite information of the web. BackRub is soon rebranded as Google, and the timing is just right. By 1998, their web index is expanding beyond what Stanford servers can handle. In fact, Google begins consuming so much bandwidth that Stanford's IT department starts to complain. It's a good problem to have. It means lots of people are using their tool, but a problem nonetheless. Larry and Sergey realize they may need to move Google off campus if it's going to keep growing. It's no longer just a research project. It's becoming a real service with real users. The lines between academia and entrepreneurship are beginning to blur. However, the two founders are still hesitant about fully diving into building a company. Both are deeply invested in their PhD programs. In an ideal world, they'd prefer for someone else to take this brilliant search engine and run with it, allowing them to return to life as typical grad students. They even consider selling the search engine so they can focus on their dissertations. But destiny has other plans for Larry Page, and Sergey Brin Google is about to make the leap from the ivory tower of Stanford into the real world, where far greater challenges and even greater rewards await. From dorm room to garage startup. In early 1998, as Google's usage keeps climbing, Larry and Sergey face a crossroad. Should they continue nurturing Google within Stanford, or is it time to spin it out as a company? Encouraged by their professor and Larry's advisor, Terry Winograd, and other mentors, they decide to at least explore the idea of starting a company to bring Google to everyone. The academic environment at Stanford is supportive of entrepreneurship. After all, just a few years earlier, Stanford students had founded Yahoo and other startups. Still, Larry and Sergey are reluctant businessmen. They often joked that they have no idea how to run a business, only how to code. But operating a search engine for the entire web is becoming expensive. They need funding, hardware, and a team. So they sketch out a basic business plan and begin demoing Google to potential investors. Their big break comes in August 1998 during a breakfast meeting on the Stanford campus. There, Larry and Sergey demonstrate Google to Andy Bechtolsheim, a legendary Silicon Valley investor and co-founder of Sun Microsystems. Andy watches the demo. Likely a sparse web page with a search box returning lightning-fast, eerily accurate results. He's immediately impressed. In fact, before the meeting even properly concludes, Andy says, "This is fantastic. How much do you guys need?" Caught off guard, Larry and Sergey exchange glances. They haven't even incorporated Google as a company yet, but Andy is ready to invest on the spot. He quickly writes a check for $100,000 made out to Google Inc., a company that technically doesn't yet exist. The founders are stunned. Andy Bechtolsheim's gut-level endorsement means they suddenly have seed funding. If they incorporate, we'll, register the company name and get back to you. They promise that $100,000 seed investment from an industry icon becomes the catalyst for Google's official launch. As Sergey later quipped, "We had to incorporate Google quickly just to cash that check." On September 4th, 1998, Google filed for incorporation in California, officially becoming Google Inc., with that Larry Page and Sergey Brin, once just two grad students, became co-founders of a startup. They took a leave of absence from their PhD programs, having already completed their master's degrees, to focus full-time on the company. It was a bold choice, stepping off the academic path. But their mission felt urgent. "We have to get Google out to the whole world," Larry told a friend. "It's too useful to keep at Stanford only." Google's first office wasn't a downtown high-rise or a sleek co-working space. It was a garage in suburban Menlo Park, California. More specifically, it was the garage of a house owned by Susan Wojcicki, a friend who would later become Google's 16th employee and eventually the CEO of YouTube. For $1,700 a month, Larry and Sergey secured a workspace that would go down in Silicon Valley legend. It was the quintessential startup garage: concrete floors, exposed beams, and the lingering scent of motor oil. Into this modest space, they crammed a hodgepodge of clunky desktop computers, their Lego-framed server folding office chairs, and a ping-pong table for breaks. To make it slightly more welcoming, they installed a patch of bright blue carpet. With no air conditioning, hot days meant flinging the garage door wide open, giving neighbors the occasional glimpse of two young men and a few early teammates typing furiously amid stacks of humming hardware. Here in this unassuming Menlo Park garage, Google Inc. took shape, a humble launchpad for what would become one of the most transformative companies in modern history. This is where Google truly comes to life as a company. The initial team is tiny. It's basically Larry, Sergey, and a couple of fellow Stanford grad students they enlist as engineers. One early hire is Craig Silverstein, Google's first employee, who later joked he was drawn in by Larry and Sergey's sheer conviction that they could change how people find information. With the money from Andy Bechtolsheim and additional small investments from family friends and other angels, bringing the total to around $1 million, they buy more disks and servers. By day, the garage is filled with the clack of keyboards and whir of computer fans. By night, it glows with the pale light of monitors as the team works late. Energy is high, and the atmosphere is playful. Typical of a student project, except now real users on the internet are relying on Google to search the web. In between coding sessions, they have spirited Nerf gunfights and ping pong matches on that garage ping pong table. It's not all play though. The team is intensely focused on scaling the search engine to handle more queries and a rapidly growing index. They know every improvement in Google's performance or search quality has an immediate impact now. Even in these early days, Larry and Sergey's unconventional style sets the tone. For instance, they place a whiteboard in the garage listing Google's primary mission in plain sight: to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. This mission isn't just corporate fluff. It's genuinely what drives them, a continuation of their academic ethos. They also adopt the quirky unofficial motto, "Don't be evil." In a company meeting, perhaps in that very garage, someone proposes that phrase half-jokingly to summarize their values. It sticks to Larry and Sergey. Don't be evil means prioritize the user and the greater good over quick profits, as Google's early corporate philosophy put it. We believe strongly that in the long term, we will be better served as shareholders and in all other ways by a company that does good things for the world even if we forgo some short-term gains. It was a bold stance for a tiny startup, but it resonated with the idealism of its young founders. Interestingly, around this same time in 1998, Larry and Sergey create something fun that will become a beloved Google tradition. The first Google Doodle, they plan to attend the Burning Man Festival in Nevada and will be away for a couple of days, so they tweak the Google homepage logo to include a little stick figure drawing of the Burning Man icon. It's meant as a humorous out-of-office note to users, basically saying, if the site breaks, we're in the desert. The doodle is published on the site in August 1998, just weeks before Google's official incorporation. Users see the quirky logo and chuckle. Even in its infancy, Google is showing a playful personality. As one early Google employee later said, if you read any corporate branding textbook, it will tell you to keep your logo consistent. But Larry and Sergey said, why not? We should have fun with this. That rebellious fun streak, willing to break corporate rules in favor of creativity, was pure Larry and Sergey. The first ever Google Doodle from August 1998, a stick figure behind the second O of Google, indicating Larry and Sergey were off to the Burning Man Festival. This playful tweak was a bit of a joke that signaled Google's unconventional spirit and would evolve into the beloved Google Doodles tradition. Back at the garage by late 1998, Google Search, still labeled beta on the site, is serving around 10,000 queries a day, a sign of real traction. The clean, sparse homepage loads blazingly fast, partly because Larry and Sergey aren't HTML experts and kept the design minimal on purpose. There's just a colorful Google logo complete with an exclamation mark in those days, Google, and a search box. No banner ads, no portal clutter. This simplicity is almost shocking compared to the busy Yahoo or Excite pages of the time, but users love the speed and precision. Google's results often give exactly what you need on the first try. It's like finding a needle in the haystack of the web without the hay. As Google's own philosophy would later say, fast is better than slow. We may be the only people who can say our goal is to have users leave our website as quickly as possible, meaning get your answer and go. Larry and Sergey proudly measure how quickly Google returns results under half a second and how it often sends users right to the answer rather than trapping them in a portal. This user-first focus is ingrained from day one. Growing pains and bold moves. The year 1999 arrives, and Google is gaining serious momentum. The tiny team moves out of the garage in February into a slightly roomier space in Palo Alto, specifically 165 University Avenue, a building that has housed other startups. They're now in the heart of Silicon Valley's startup scene. The office above a bike shop is still cramped, but at least it has real desks and more reliable internet. By mid-1999, Google is answering 500,000 queries per day, and it's clear to everyone involved that they have something big on their hands. But running something big requires resources. Larry and Sergey need more funding to scale up infrastructure and hire beyond the handful of ultra-dedicated colleagues they have. In June 1999, they secure a major investment, $25 million in venture capital, from two of the most prestigious Silicon Valley firms. Importantly, this deal is brokered by John Doerr and Michael Moritz, legendary VCs who see Google's potential. Suddenly, Google has the means to grow, and yes, maybe buy the team a slice or two of celebratory pizza and some beers. But the infusion also comes with something Larry and Sergey have been avoiding: pressure to bring in experienced management. The VCs are concerned. Google's onto something huge, but these founders are very young and relatively inexperienced in business. The investors nudge them to hire a seasoned CEO to provide adult supervision. At first, Larry and Sergey bristle at this idea. They have a bit of the Steve Jobs streak, a belief in their own vision and a distrust of bringing in corporate types who might water down their culture. But they also recognize that if Google is to fulfill its mission, it can't fail due to novice mistakes. They compromise by agreeing to look for a CEO while they continue running product and technology. This search will eventually lead to Eric Schmidt in 2001. But let's not jump ahead too far yet. Despite these growing pains, 1999 also features one of the most fateful missed opportunities in tech history. Though it turned out to be a blessing, Larry and Sergey, still ambivalent about being businessmen, actually try to sell Google this year. Yes, you read that right. The founders of Google at one point hoped not to run Google. They approached Excite, one of the leading internet search portals of the 90s, and offered to sell them Google's technology outright. The price initially around $1 million, a steal for what we now know was a world-changing innovation. Why so low? Because Larry and Sergey were genuinely considering returning to finish their PhDs, and a modest sale plus jobs at Excite could have let them do that. In negotiations, Excite's CEO George Bell hemmed and hawed. According to later reports, venture capitalist Vinod Khosla, who was invested in Excite and also saw Google's value, tried to broker a deal at $750,000 after Larry insisted on some terms. Incredibly, Excite turned them down. George Bell felt that Google's search was too good. It might direct users off Excite's portal too quickly, hurting their advertising business model. By other accounts, he found Larry and Sergey's insistence on replacing Excite's own technology with Google's outright to be overbearing. Either way, the deal fell through. Whoops, one might say, had Excite accepted the history of the internet would be very different. By 2010, Google's market cap had reached $167 billion, and much more in the years that followed, while Excite ended up merged and marginalized. For Larry and Sergey, rejection was a turning point. One can imagine them leaving that meeting in 1999 frustrated. They thought they had an exit ramp, a way to hand off their project and return to academia. But fate said no. I guess it's up to us now. Larry might have muttered. Indeed, with no buyer, they doubled down on their own company. In truth, the Excite episode was the last time Larry Page and Sergey Brin ever tried to sell Google. From that point on, their path was to grow Google themselves to take it as far as it could go. And in retrospect, that rejection by Excite was one of the best things that ever happened to them. It forced the founders to fully embrace their role as entrepreneurs and stewards of their creation. Google's star continues to rise. By late 1999, the company moves yet again, this time to a larger office in Mountain View, California, a few miles down the road. The new space at 2400 Bay Shore, and soon after the adjoining buildings that would become the Googleplex, finally gives them room to breathe. Outside in the parking lot, the young team unwinds by playing roller hockey with the founders, a full-contact game where even Larry and Sergey get knocked around and come back bruised and grinning. Inside the office looks more like a playground than a workplace brightly colored exercise. Balls couches, maybe a lava lamp or two, like a kindergarten crossed with a freshman dorm. One early Googler observed, they even have a company dog Yoshka who wanders the halls, a gentle big dog belonging to an early employee. All of this was deliberately unconventional. Our founders built Google around the idea that work should be challenging and the challenge should be fun. The company later explained, emphasizing that you can be serious without wearing a suit. No stuffy dress codes here. T-shirts and jeans are fine. Larry and Sergey themselves practically live in t-shirts, often matching gray ones. This culture stands in stark contrast to many corporate environments, and it soon becomes legendary Google's office perks. Free meals, massage therapists on-site, casual decor will set a new standard in Silicon Valley. But these aren't just gimmicks. They serve a philosophy. Keep employees happy and creative, and they will build great things. Amidst the quirky culture, the team's intensity on work hasn't lessened. In fact, the intellectual bar is higher than ever. Meetings at Google are famously heated. Working at Google felt like a never-ending thesis. Defense One early employee recalled, "Everywhere you turn, someone might challenge your ideas." Larry and Sergey encouraged this kind of debate. Remember, their own friendship was forged by argument. They'll readily call an idea stupid if they think it is, and they expect you to defend it or improve it. This can be jarring for newcomers, but it forges a culture of truth-seeking and resilience. Engineers debate products with the founders with surprisingly little hierarchy. Larry might raise an eyebrow and quietly say, "I'm not convinced," which everyone knows means you'd better come back with stronger evidence. Sergey might excitedly jump into a coding session to test a theory himself. There's an intellectual rigor, a peer review ethos that came straight from academia into the startup. By now, Google Search is undeniably one of the best search engines in the world. In 2000, Google signs a deal with Yahoo to power Yahoo search results. That partnership exposes Google to millions of new users. The query volume explodes. And interestingly, Google still hasn't heavily focused on making money. But reality hits servers, and talent are expensive, and that $25 million won't last forever. So in late 2000, the company introduces AdWords, a platform for businesses to run text ads on Google search results. This is a pivotal product decision. Larry and Sergey have been wary of advertising, fearing it could compromise search quality. But they find a compromise that aligns with their values. AdWords will be text-only ads, clearly labeled and strictly relevant to the search query. No flashy banners, no pop-ups, just small sponsored links. Furthermore, the ads are ranked by a combination of bid and quality, not just money. This encourages relevance. This approach stems from their philosophy. Focus on the user, and all else will follow. If ads are useful rather than intrusive, users won't mind them, and Google can earn revenue ethically. AdWords proves immensely successful. By 2001, Google is profitable and generating steady income, which critically helps it survive the dot-com crash that is wiping out many other startups around that time. In a sea of dot-com failures, Google stands out as a company with a real product, real users, and now real revenue. The success and stability mean Larry and Sergey can further push their ambitious agenda. They expand the index to over 1 billion pages, solidifying Google's lead in comprehensiveness. They launched Google News in 2002, an aggregation of news stories born from a 20% project by an engineer after 9/11 to cluster news by topic. In 2004, a small team working on their own initiative with the famous 20% time policy, where Googlers can spend a day a week on side projects, releases Gmail, offering a then unheard of 1 GB of free email storage to users. That was about 500 times more storage than competitors offered. A classic Google 10x move that shocked the industry. People literally thought Gmail was an April Fool's joke when announced on April 1st, 2004. But it was real, and it demonstrated Google's penchant for game-changing innovation. The Google culture: fun, fearless, and 10x thinking. From the beginning, Larry and Sergey cultivated a culture at Google that reflected their personalities and principles. It was a culture that said yes to big ideas and no to traditional corporate restraints. They hired smart, creative, and slightly unconventional people, often prioritizing brains and passion over experience. Googlers came from diverse backgrounds, but they shared a certain spark, a willingness to challenge assumptions, the company's internal motto. You can be serious without a suit summed it up. One could be intensely serious about work. Indeed, Google's goals were lofty, without conforming to stuffy business norms. Casual dress, flexible hours, and a playful environment weren't just perks. They were meant to foster innovation through freedom. One hallmark of Google's culture was the famous 20% time policy Larry and Sergey encouraged engineers to spend roughly a day a week working on projects outside their main tasks, anything they were passionate about that could benefit Google. This wasn't tracked with a stopwatch, but it was a cultural permission slip to experiment. From this freedom came products like Gmail, Google News, Google Maps features, and more. It was a tangible expression of Larry's belief in empowering talented people to pursue bold ideas. Great creative things are more likely to happen with the right company culture, Google would later articulate. And indeed, many of Google's breakthroughs originated from employees tinkering ambitiously on the side. Not every company would tolerate that kind of apparent distraction from core duties, but Larry and Sergey saw it as essential to staying ahead. They weren't interested in small incremental improvements. They wanted those 10x leaps, making something 10 times better. Not just 10% better. Meetings at Google often felt like grad seminars. Any idea could be picked apart, refined, or sometimes scrapped if it didn't meet the founder's standards. Larry in particular was known for his intense focus on user experience and speed. He challenged teams to make Google faster, cleaner, more efficient. A millisecond delay was too long. An extra word on the homepage was too much. Under his quiet demeanor was a relentless drive. Is this product great? Why not make it better? Sergey was often the one testing products in wild ways. He famously would run queries in many languages to see how international friendly they were. Or he'd suggest crazy features like the early versions of Google's augmented reality glasses, which much later became Google Glass. He also kept things light. Known for his sense of humor, Sergey might show up at a meeting wearing goofy props or break the tension by cracking a joke. Once he arrived at a company all hands on rollerblades, just because he even had a high-flying hobby. He would practice trapeze and once performed for Googlers, demonstrating a literal no-fear attitude. If Larry was the obsessive product guru, Sergey was the resident tech visionary and mischief maker, always pushing boundaries of what Google might do next. From scanning books in libraries to launching weather balloons for global internet, a precursor to Project Loon. The "don't be evil" ethos also permeated the culture. It empowered even low-level employees to question decisions that felt ethically gray. In meetings about advertising products or data usage, someone could literally ask, "Is this evil?" Half joking, half serious, and it would spark discussion. This open dialogue kept Google's leadership on their toes, forcing them to justify choices not just on business grounds, but on values. For example, in the early 2000s, as Google considered entering China with a censored search engine, a highly controversial move, internal debates raged. The company did launch Google China with filtering in 2006 to comply with local laws. But Sergey, who had personal family experience with censorship in the Soviet Union, was deeply uneasy about it. Google eventually pulled out of mainland China search in 2010 due to those concerns. The "don't be evil" mantra didn't mean Google was perfect, but it meant employees and founders alike were continuously grappling with doing the right thing in complex scenarios. Culturally, Google also stood out for its flat structure and informality. In the early days, Larry and Sergey literally sat in the open office with everyone else. No private corner offices. Anyone could approach them to pitch an idea or report a bug. They held weekly TGIF all-hands meetings, initially on Fridays, later Thursdays, where any employee could ask any question, from serious product strategy to why the cafeteria ran out of ice cream. Larry and Sergey answered candidly, sometimes awkwardly, but candidly nonetheless. This practice built a sense of transparency and community. It also reinforced that Google was mission-driven, not just profit-driven. At one TGIF, a new hire nervously asked why Google wasn't aggressively maximizing certain ad revenues. Sergey responded by reiterating the importance of user trust and experience over short-term gain, a live example of principle over profit. We wouldn't survive if people didn't trust us, he noted. These interactions became the lure that drew thousands of bright minds to Google, all eager to be part of a company where big ideas and integrity mattered. One cannot mention Google's culture without the environment of the Googleplex, the campus that became Google's headquarters. After leasing buildings in Mountain View in 1999 and rapidly expanding, Google eventually acquired an entire campus that they nicknamed the Googleplex, a play on Googleplex, the number. They painted bikes in Google's colors for employees to zip between buildings. They installed volleyball courts, communal pianos, free snack bars known as micro kitchens, and themed conference rooms. The campus felt like a tech utopia. But all these perks had a purpose to encourage employees to spend time at work and collide with each other's ideas. Larry and Sergey believed in serendipity, that a chat over free lunch could spark the next big feature, or an idea scribbled on a cafe whiteboard might become a new product. As it was said, new ideas emerge in a cafe line at a team meeting or at the gym, and they are put into practice with dizzying speed. The Googleplex was designed to be an innovation playground as much as a workplace. By fostering this environment, Larry and Sergey ensured that Google remained a magnet for top talent. Bright engineers from around the world wanted to work there not just for the salary or stock options, though those became lucrative, but to be part of something important. Google's projects in the 2000s expanded beyond search. They digitized millions of library books. Google Books launched initiatives to make scholarly research. Searchable Google Scholar mapped the entire world. Google Maps and Earth, and even started research into self-driving cars and artificial intelligence. Underpinning all of these was the same fundamental belief in the power of knowledge and technology to help people. Sergey Brin once said, "I want to be remembered as being very innovative, very trusted and ethical, and ultimately making a big difference in the world." That personal ideal became Google's collective ethos. The early culture Larry and Sergey built was the engine that propelled Google from a search engine into a veritable factory of innovation, always pushing for the next 10x breakthrough. From startup to tech superpower. As the 2000s progressed, Google evolved from a scrappy startup into a veritable tech titan, but not without growing pains and pivotal shifts in leadership. By 2001, Google had grown to hundreds of employees and was straining under the managerial improvisations of its founders. Recognizing this, Larry and Sergey, prodded by their investors, hired Eric Schmidt as CEO in mid-2001. Eric Schmidt, a tech industry veteran, ex-CTO of Sun, CEO of Novell, was brought in as the so-called adult supervision. This move could have backfired, inserting a boss above two strong-willed founders, but Larry and Sergey made it work by forming a triumvirate leadership. Schmidt handled operational decisions and organizational growth. Larry and Sergey continued to drive product and technical vision as presidents of products and technology, respectively. They agreed to this structure with some reluctance, but also relief. It freed them to focus on what they loved: innovation, while someone else worried about budgets, sales deals, and legal. Over time, the trio developed mutual respect. Schmidt learned to appreciate the founders' instincts and protected the culture they'd built. For example, he upheld the 20% time policy and the casual atmosphere rather than trying to corporatize Google. In return, Larry and Sergey learned from Eric how to scale their impact, how to hire executives, how to structure teams, and how to strategize for the long term. One major milestone under this leadership team was Google's IPO initial public offering in 2004. Taking the company public meant increased scrutiny and the pressure of Wall Street. Larry and Sergey approached this event in their iconoclastic way. In their founder's IPO letter, they famously wrote, "Google is not a conventional company. We do not intend to become one." They warned prospective shareholders that Google would make long-term, sometimes unconventional decisions And that "don't be evil" was not just rhetoric. They even structured the stock offering unconventionally, using a Dutch auction to allow more people access to shares and crucially creating a dual-class stock structure. That structure ensured Larry and Sergey retained voting control over Google even as their ownership percentage would dilute, which meant they could keep steering Google's course without fear of hostile takeovers or short-term shareholder pressure. The IPO on August 19, 2004, valued Google at over $23 billion, so minting many millionaires among employees and turning Larry and Sergey into billionaires virtually overnight. Yet in typical fashion, the day of the IPO, Larry and Sergey reportedly were more focused on product meetings than stock tickers. A story goes that Sergey was rollerblading around the campus during the IPO hoopla, saying, "We have work to do." The money was just a means to an end. Freedom to pursue Google's mission on a grander scale. Post-IPO, Google truly entered its era of global expansion. The company launched new products at a rapid clip. Google Maps and Google Earth, mapping the planet with satellite imagery. Google Talk, a chat service. Google Chrome, a web browser, each of which came with strategic insight. Chrome, launched in 2008, for instance, was a response to ensure the web experience remained fast and open. It was a bold move to challenge Microsoft's Internet Explorer dominance. Android, an upstart mobile OS company, was quietly acquired in 2005 under Larry's encouragement, a move that would put Google at the center of the smartphone revolution a few years later. With Android, Google's mission to organize information extended to mobile devices, and it was given away free to phone makers to ensure ubiquity of Google services. These were strategic product decisions that cemented Google's growth. Each bet was tied to the core vision: information everywhere, whether it was scanning millions of books to make them searchable, driving Street View cars on every road to create a visual map, or launching free web-based email to get more people online. Larry and Sergey's Google thought big. Of course, becoming a tech superpower brought new challenges. As Google's influence grew, so did scrutiny from regulators, competitors, and the public. The company that started with just a search engine now had tentacles in video. Google acquired YouTube in 2006, advertising dominating online ads through search and a network of sites and many other areas. People started to question, does this much power over information make Google a gatekeeper of knowledge? The irony wasn't lost that Google had become a verb, meaning to search online, a sign of ubiquity, but also of responsibility. Larry and Sergey grappled with these implications in their own ways. Sergey took a step back from search in later years to dive into moonshot projects, heading a division called Google X, now part of Alphabet, to develop futuristic tech like self-driving cars, delivery drones, and even life extension research. He seemed to gravitate toward new challenges once Google Search was a well-oiled machine. Larry, on the other hand, when he became CEO again in 2011, after Eric Schmidt's decade-long tenure, reorganized the company to refocus on big visions and cut down bureaucratic drift that had accumulated. He pushed projects like Google+, a social network attempt, and more successfully, Google's investments in AI and infrastructure. In 2015, in one of their boldest strategic moves, Larry and Sergey announced a corporate restructuring. Google would become part of a new holding company called Alphabet Inc. Under Alphabet, Google would be one subsidiary containing the core businesses like search ads, YouTube, Android, etc. And alongside it would sit other bets like Waymo self-driving cars, Verily life sciences, and X, the moonshot factory. Larry became CEO of Alphabet, Sergey its president. This structure was intended to free the founders to oversee multiple ventures and keep fostering innovation on the edges without distracting the main Google business. Essentially, they had turned Google itself into the garage, a mature engine funding a new generation of risky projects. It was unprecedented for a company of Google's size to do this, but it showed Larry and Sergey's restless ambition. They didn't want Google to become a stagnant giant. They wanted it to keep thinking like a startup pursuing radical solutions to big problems. As Larry put it in the announcement, Alphabet is about businesses prospering through strong leaders and independence. And yes, the name Alphabet was a geeky nod to both the building blocks of language and an alphabet, an investment term for returns above benchmark. Another example of their love for wordplay. By the late 2010s, Larry Page and Sergey Brin had stepped back from day-to-day operations. In 2019, they decided to leave their executive roles, letting Google's CEO Sundar Pichai take on the role of Alphabet's CEO as well. In a public letter, they stated it was time to assume the role of proud parents, still involved as board members and controlling shareholders, but not running things day to day. Fittingly, around that time, the two made a trip down memory lane to Stanford, visiting the very office where Google was born. They found a PhD student now sitting in Larry's old desk. To that student's astonishment, the legendary founders casually dropped in, reminiscing about the early days when Sergey had illicitly given Larry a master key so he could snag the best office. It marked the end of an era, the founders seating the driver's seat of the company they created. But in doing so, Larry and Sergey demonstrated one more facet of their leadership, knowing when to step aside and let the next generation steer the ship they built. They had taken a research project and within 2 decades grown it into a $1 trillion enterprise. Their journey from Stanford dorms and a rented garage to the pinnacles of the tech industry is now Silicon Valley lore. Legacy organizing the world's information. In the quarter century since Larry Page had that midnight idea and Sergey Brin helped him chase it, the impact of their work has been nothing short of transformational. Google today is a household name globally, a tool that billions of people use to satisfy their curiosity and needs. The very fact that to Google entered the lexicon signifies how deeply it penetrated our lives. Need to settle a debate? Google it. Looking to learn a new skill? A Google search will get you started. That kind of ubiquity was exactly what Larry and Sergey envisioned when they spoke of making knowledge universally accessible. They turned the chaotic, sprawling internet into something navigable by anyone, anywhere. In doing so, they helped fulfill the early promise of the web as a democratizer of information. Knowledge that once required a trip to a library or consultation with an expert is now often just a quick search away. This is a profound change in human society, a leveling of the information playing field. It's not an exaggeration to say that Google, spearheaded by its founder's vision, has empowered individuals worldwide with knowledge that was previously out of reach. Beyond search, Larry and Sergey's legacy includes a series of products and initiatives that furthered open access to information. Google Books undertook the monumental task of scanning and digitizing tens of millions of library books, aiming to preserve and unlock the treasures of the world's libraries for all. Google Earth and Maps gave anyone with an internet connection the ability to virtually explore our planet, to see their own house from above, or take a virtual stroll down a street in a faraway city. Google Scholar made academic literature more discoverable, aiding students and researchers. YouTube, acquired under their watch, became a platform where knowledge and, admittedly, lots of cat videos could be shared via video globally. And let's not forget Android's role in bringing the internet to billions of mobile users, ensuring that the era of smartphones was one where information would remain open and accessible rather than locked to proprietary platforms. Larry and Sergey's strong belief in technology as a force for good also had ripple effects in philanthropy and global initiatives. They started Google.org, the company's philanthropic arm, to apply Google's resources to global challenges like climate change, public health, and poverty. They invested in renewable energy research early on, aiming to offset Google's massive energy usage with green alternatives. Both founders signed the Giving Pledge, committing to give away much of their wealth. Sergey, inspired by his mother's battle with Parkinson's disease, has funded research into its cure. Larry, always fascinated by transportation, invested in efforts to build flying cars and innovative public transit. These might seem tangential to Google, but they reflect the same ethos. Think big, tackle hard problems, and don't shy away from the seemingly impossible. Their legacy is also cultural. Google's success and the way it was achieved changed how startups and even big companies operate. The open office, fun-loving, yet hard-driving work culture they championed has been emulated across industries. Today, it's almost expected for tech companies to offer perks, like free meals or creative time for personal projects. A direct echo of what Google popularized. More importantly, Google's rise validated the notion that a small group of passionate people in an academic setting can disrupt incumbents with far greater resources. When Google emerged, giants like Microsoft were dominant, and there were dozens of search engines. But an idea born out of a PhD thesis and nurtured with academic rigor blew them all away. This has inspired countless young entrepreneurs to try their own moonshots from dorm rooms and garages, with Larry and Sergey as exemplars of innovation-driven entrepreneurship. Of course, any honest look at Google's impact also acknowledges controversies. Over time, concerns over privacy, data monopoly, and the sheer power of Google have grown. Could Larry and Sergey have predicted that one day regulators would accuse Google of being a monopoly, as happened in various antitrust cases? Perhaps not in the beginning, when they were just trying to survive and make something useful, but it's a testament to how wildly successful Google became. The very mission to organize the world's information means Google sits at an extremely influential crossroads of society. The founders often responded to these issues by reiterating trust as essential. "We wouldn't survive if people didn't trust us," Sergey noted, and by trying, though not always succeeding, to balance their idealism with practical business needs. As they stepped back, they entrusted others to carry that mantle and address these challenges going forward. In December 2019, when Larry Page and Sergey Brin announced their departure from active management, their farewell letter echoed the tone of two proud inventors who had seen their creation grow up. If the company was a person, it would be a young adult of 21, and it would be time to leave the roost, they wrote. They expressed confidence in Google and Alphabet's leadership and said they would stay involved as advisors and board members. It was a graceful exit, and it underscored something profound about their legacy. They didn't just build a company. They built an institution, one with a life of its own that transcended them, driven by the mission and values they instilled. On a final reflective note, consider the journey we've explored. Larry Page and Sergey Brin started as two inquisitive kids, one disassembling inkjet printers in Michigan and dreaming of Tesla's inventions, the other growing up in the USSR and marveling at the freedom of American libraries when he arrived. They met by chance, argued intensely, then bonded over a shared vision to change the way we find information. They leveraged their academic environment to create something fundamentally new. They took risks, leaving school, rejecting tempting offers to sell out, and instead built an enterprise according to their own rules. Along the way, they infused it with their personality. Witty Google's name and playful logos, idealistic, accessible, and useful knowledge for all, and daring, have a healthy disregard for the impossible indeed. That Google's brainchild, which started as Larry's dream, and Sergey's savvy, grew up to index the entire web, and more fulfilling that early dream, almost literally. Today, whenever you quickly get an answer to a burning question or discover something new online you never would have found, otherwise you are experiencing a bit of that Larry and Sergey magic, the legacy of two young men who truly wanted to make the world's information available to everyone. As an epilogue, picture one more scene. Stanford University, one quiet evening in 2019. Larry Page and Sergey Brin stroll through the halls of the Gates Computer Science Building, peeking into the labs where brilliant students toil away, much like they did years ago. they stop outside the office that Larry once occupied. Maybe for a moment, they flash back to that night in '96, the fervent scribbles on a whiteboard, the excitement they felt as they realized this could really work. Perhaps Sergey nudges Larry. "Remember when we thought we might just license this thing and finish our PhDs?" And Larry laughs. "Yeah, I'm glad we didn't." The spark they lit back then has long since become a bonfire illuminating the world, and countless others are warming their hands at it. Inspired to light their own, Larry Page and Sergey Brin's story is more than the tale of Google. It's a testament to the power of innovation partnership and staying true to one's vision. They organized the world's information, and in doing so, they changed the world itself, an inspiring legacy for any entrepreneur, dreamer, or curious mind.